at 021, 5 hours on the 7th of August, 2025. A 41-year-old maize farmer in Córdoba province, Argentina collapsed in his home with symptoms that looked like the flu but weren't. Fever, chills, severe back pain, muscle aches that felt like his skeleton was breaking from the inside out. His wife rushed him to Hospital Privado Córdoba at 0340 hours. Within 12 hours, his condition deteriorated. His breathing became labored. His kidneys were shutting down. Blood work showed something terrifying. His platelets were plummeting. His white blood cells were chaotic. His liver enzymes were spiking into dangerous territory. By hour 24, hemorrhagic bleeding was visible on his skin petechiae, the telltale pinpoint hemorrhages that signal a virus destroying the blood vessel lining from the inside. The ER physician ordered a viral panel. Everything came back negative. Not influenza, not dengue, not Hantavirus, or so the standard PCR said. But something was deeply, catastrophically wrong. The sample was flagged for deep sequencing to the National Institute of Infectious Diseases in Buenos Aires. What the hospital didn't know was that at precisely the same moment, within a 6-hour window, a 7-year-old agricultural worker in Jalisco, Mexico was being admitted to Hospital Angeles with identical symptoms: hemorrhagic fever without a known cause, kidney failure progressing at frightening speed, bleeding manifestations. Simultaneously, 2,100 kilometers away in Sinaloa, Mexico, another patient arrived at a rural clinic with the same clinical constellation. Then, another in Nayarit. 3 separate agricultural zones. 4 cases in 48 hours. All presenting with hemorrhagic fever. All in agricultural workers. All in regions experiencing unusual rodent population explosions. The Mexican authorities made the call to their hemorrhagic fever response team at 1,630 hours on August 8th. By August 10th, the sequencing results from Argentina were complete. The lab director, Dr. Martín Echeverría, stared at the genetic data for 3 full minutes without moving. The genome was Hantavirus. Definitely Hantavirus. The bunyavirus family signature was unmistakable. The RNA structure, the segmented genome architecture, the polymerase sequences all screamed Hantaviridae. But the genetic distance from all known hantaviruses was shocking. This wasn't Sin Nombre virus. It wasn't Andes virus. It wasn't Sol virus or Pumala or Dobrava. This was something new. Dr. Echeverría pulled up the phylogenetic analysis. The evolutionary distance suggested this virus had been circulating in rodent populations for potentially decades, evolving in isolation, accumulating mutations, becoming something distinct. A spillover event from a reservoir species that nobody had been monitoring. His second call was to the Pan American Health Organization. His third was to the CDC's Special Pathogens Branch in Atlanta. By August 12th, confirmation came from Mexico. The 3 cases in Sinaloa and Nayarit were also the novel Hantavirus. The same genetic sequence, the same unprecedented pathogen. But here's where the situation escalated beyond containment protocols. A 4-year-old woman in Jalisco. She hadn't been in contact with rodents. She hadn't worked in fields. She was a nurse who had treated the first Mexican agricultural worker. A healthcare worker who had followed standard precautions, worn gloves and mask during patient care. And she was now showing symptoms. For hantavirologists, that single fact created immediate, visceral alarm. Hantaviruses don't transmit person to person. They spread through aerosolized rodent urine and feces, the dried particles that become airborne when contaminated surfaces are disturbed. Human-to-human transmission is extraordinarily rare. It had happened with Andes virus in Argentina and Chile in the 1990s, a terrifying cluster that killed multiple people in a single transmission chain. But it was rare, documented, unusual. This was happening again. But the genetic data suggested something worse. The virus itself might have evolved human-to-human transmissibility. It wasn't just an unusual exposure. The viral genome showed mutations in the glycoproteins, the surface proteins that viruses use to latch onto cells that were consistent with adaptation to human respiratory epithelial cells. On lab monitors in Atlanta, Buenos Aires, and Mexico City, evolutionary biologists were staring at receptor-binding domain mutations that shouldn't exist in a hantavirus. This virus, Dr. Elizabeth Chen at the CDC told her emergency response team, has molecular signatures suggesting it's optimized for human cell entry. That's not random mutation. That's convergent evolution toward human-to-human spread. By August 15th, the case count had jumped to 23 confirmed infections across Mexico and Argentina. Contact tracing revealed transmission chains. The nurse who'd been infected had been to a birthday party. 3 family members were now showing symptoms. One of them had attended a wedding. More exposures, more potential secondary transmission. The exponential math was starting. August 15th, 23 cases. August 18th, 61 cases. August 21st, 147 cases. The doubling time was approximately 3.2 days. The basic reproduction number, the R value, was being calculated in real time as new cases emerged. Initial estimates suggested R equals 1.8 to 2.2. That's higher than seasonal influenza. That's pandemic-adjacent territory. What epidemiologists in the Southern Hemisphere couldn't have predicted was the simultaneous emergence on the other side of the world. On August 19th, a case appeared in rural Romania. An 44-year-old grain storage worker had presented to a Bucharest hospital with hemorrhagic fever. PCR testing at the Cantacuzino Institute came back. Novel Hantavirus. Genetic sequencing showed it was the same virus that was spreading in the Americas. Same pathogen, different continent. Impossible timeline. Unless the genomic sequences were identical at 99.7% nucleotide similarity. The mutations that define the virus were present in both the American and European samples. But the phylogenetic analysis was puzzling. This shouldn't be possible. The virus in Romania should have diverged from the American lineage if it had been spreading simultaneously. Unless they'd both originated from the same source animal colony weeks earlier. Unless there was a shared reservoir, perhaps smuggled exotic rodents, or contaminated agricultural feed, or something more sinister. Or unless the sequencing timing was revealing that the virus had actually been spreading undetected for longer than anyone realized. By August 22nd, cases in Romania jumped to 8, then 14, then 27, clustered around agricultural facilities and grain processing centers. Health authorities in Romania, Argentina, and Mexico simultaneously made emergency declarations. The WHO issued a statement on August 23rd that would trigger global monitoring. A novel hantavirus, with evidence of human-to-human transmission, has been identified across 3 countries on 2 continents. This requires immediate international coordination. The video of that WHO announcement would go viral on social media. The word hantavirus suddenly trended. Panic buying of N95 masks began in several countries. Agricultural workers in Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia, and Hungary started calling in sick. Real-time PCR testing of acute respiratory samples spiked across Eastern Europe. And then, the discovery that made epidemiologists grip their desks contact tracing in Romania revealed something that violated hantavirus transmission dogma. A grain worker had been to a family dinner. 17 family members had attended. 6 of them developed symptoms. Not all of them had direct contact with the symptomatic patient. One was infected during a 15-minute conversation in a kitchen. No respiratory symptoms in the index case, just casual, close contact conversation. The virus was transmitting more efficiently than anyone expected. In Argentina, the first patient, the maize farmer, died on August 19th. Hemorrhagic shock, organ failure. Despite aggressive supportive care, despite attempts at managing the hemorrhagic manifestations, his kidneys failed. Then, his lungs. The bleeding became uncontrollable. By August 24th, the case fatality rate was being calculated. 7 deaths out of 56 confirmed cases in the Americas. 11 deaths out of 34 inches Romania. In Mexico, the mortality tracking showed 4 deaths from 28 cases. CFR estimates, 11 to 18%. That's worse than Andes virus. That's in Ebola territory. Hospital ICUs in Córdoba, Jalisco, and Bucharest were becoming overwhelmed. Patients with hemorrhagic fever require isolation protocols. They require intensive, supportive care. They bleed from multiple orifices, nosebleeds, gastrointestinal hemorrhage, hematuria. Medical staff were experiencing traumatic exposure. In one hospital in Sinaloa, a patient hemorrhaged so profusely from the lungs that the nursing staff was forced to call for a hazmat team for environmental decontamination. The viral load in blood and respiratory secretions was extraordinarily high. "It's like nothing I've seen," Dr. Carlos Mendez from Hospital Angeles told his colleagues on a secure call. "The viral replication is aggressive. The immune response is hyper-inflammatory. Patients are going from mild symptoms to hemorrhagic crisis in less than 72 hours. Real-time blood work analysis showed the mechanism. The virus was triggering a catastrophic immune response, cytokine storm. The patient's own immune system was attacking its own endothelial cells, the blood vessel linings. The result was hemorrhage, organ dysfunction, coagulopathy. The blood lost its ability to clot properly, leading to simultaneous bleeding and thrombosis. By August 26th, the global case count had reached 312 confirmed infections across 5 countries: Argentina, Mexico, Romania, then Bulgaria, reported its first cases, then Serbia. The case count was doubling every 3 days. On August 27th, a sequencing team at the University of Buenos Aires was comparing viral genomes from patients infected on different dates. They were looking for mutation accumulation, how quickly the virus was evolving during its spread through human populations. What they found made them call an emergency meeting. The virus was diversifying at an unusual rate. Multiple independent mutations were appearing in separate transmission chains. But more alarming, some of these mutations were appearing in the same genomic regions across different patients. 3 separate transmission chains, 3 independent mutations in the glycoprotein coding region, all in positions that affected viral cell entry. That's convergent evolution. The virus was solving the same immunological problem simultaneously across geographic regions. It's adapting to human transmission in real time, the lead researcher, Dr. Sofia Ruiz, explained to the WHO Emergency Task Force. Each generation of viral replication is refining its ability to infect human cells and evade human antibodies. The implication was staggering. This wasn't a single spillover event. This wasn't a virus that had accidentally adapted to humans and would plateau. This was a pathogen that was actively evolving to become more human transmissible. If this continued, if the mutation pattern held, the R value could climb. The transmission could become even more efficient. Within weeks, this could be a self-sustaining human pandemic. A critical decision point arrived on August 28th. The WHO Emergency Committee had to decide: do we recommend mass prophylaxis with antiviral medications in affected regions and their borders? Do we recommend travel restrictions? Do we recommend quarantine of asymptomatic contacts? The calculus was brutal. Antivirals like ribavirin, which had shown some efficacy against other hantaviruses, could potentially prevent symptomatic infection if given within the first 48 hours of exposure. But the drug had significant side effects: hemolytic anemia, teratogenic effects in pregnant women. The supply was limited. Using it prophylactically would deplete stocks and leave hospitalized patients without treatment options. Travel restrictions could slow spread, but the virus was already in 5 countries. Asymptomatic transmission was confirmed. Border control might slow, but not stop, the pandemic trajectory. Quarantine of contacts would require identifying everyone who'd been in the same room as a confirmed case for more than 15 minutes. In societies with dense populations, that's thousands of people. Enforcing quarantine without causing economic and social collapse is practically impossible. What would you do if you were making this decision right now? Comment prophylaxis if you distribute antivirals to potentially exposed populations. Comment restrictions if you'd implement strict travel and quarantine measures. Comment surveillance if you'd rely on monitoring and reactive response instead. The WHO chose a middle path: enhanced surveillance, rapid contact tracing, antiviral distribution in hospitals, and travel advisories, but not mandatory restrictions. It was a gamble on containment. The assumption was that aggressive contact tracing could identify chains before exponential spread became unstoppable. On August 30th, a team at the Pasteur Institute in Paris had a breakthrough. They'd been testing monoclonal antibodies, synthetic immune proteins, designed to bind to the hantavirus glycoproteins. They had a panel of 47 different antibodies developed from survivors of previous hantavirus outbreaks, modified and engineered. One of them, monoclonal antibody HA2847, showed remarkable neutralizing capacity against the novel virus in cell culture. It bound to the glycoprotein with high affinity. When introduced to viral cultures, it reduced viral replication by 94%. In vitro. In dishes. Not yet in humans. But it was a target, a mechanism, a potential therapeutic. Simultaneously, researchers in Mexico had identified a pattern in survivors. Those who received aggressive supportive care and received early antiviral treatment with ribavirin and interferon alpha had significantly better outcomes. The mortality dropped from 18% to approximately 7% in treated patients. It wasn't a cure, but it was a survival improvement. By September 1st, the first patients were receiving the monoclonal antibody HA2000, 847 inches, clinical trials in Buenos Aires and Bucharest. The initial results came back within 48 hours. 3 patients received the antibody infusion. All 3 showed reduction in viral load within 24 hours. By 72 hours, 2 of the 3 were improving. Their hemorrhagic manifestations were stabilizing. Their organ function was beginning to recover. It was working. Partially, not perfectly, but it was the first evidence that this virus could be fought. The hopeful narrative spread. Scientists had found a weapon. The pandemic could be contained. Relief. But viral evolution had other plans. On September 5th, a sequencing team in Mexico City was analyzing samples from patients who'd started receiving the monoclonal antibody treatment. One of the treated patients had actually worsened despite therapy. His viral load had initially dropped, then spiked again after 48 hours. The sequencing revealed why. The virus had mutated. Specifically, in the epitope, the exact location on the glycoprotein where the monoclonal antibody was supposed to bind. The virus had escaped the antibody, not through resistance during treatment, but through evolution. A point mutation that changed the shape of the binding site, just enough that the antibody no longer fit. It had happened in a single patient, during a single round of viral replication, under the selective pressure of the monoclonal antibody. For virologists, this was a nightmare scenario repeating itself. Just when humanity found a weapon, the virus evolved a counter. The implications were immediate. The monoclonal antibody that had shown such promise was now compromised. The virus had demonstrated that it could evade pharmaceutical intervention through mutation, which meant treatment would need to be cocktails, multiple antibodies simultaneously, making it exponentially harder to achieve complete viral escape, which meant the cost of treatment would skyrocket, which meant lower income regions wouldn't have access. By September 8th, the global case count had reached 847 confirmed infections. 8 countries now: Argentina, Mexico, Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia, Hungary, and 2 new countries, Czech Republic and Poland. The transmission chains were becoming harder to trace. Community transmission was beginning. In several Romanian cities, cases were appearing in people with no known exposure to agricultural facilities. Grocery store workers, school teachers, postal carriers. The virus was becoming endemic in the human population. Hospital capacity in affected regions was critically strained. In Córdoba, the ICU was at 116% capacity patients, in hallways, in recovery rooms, in makeshift isolation areas. Ventilator availability was becoming a limiting factor. The case fatality rate had climbed to 14% overall, though it varied by region and treatment access. In hospitals with access to monoclonal antibodies and supportive care, it was 8%. In under-resourced facilities, it was 22%. On September 10th, the European Union was having emergency meetings about travel restrictions within Schengen space. Some countries wanted to close borders. Others argued it was economically catastrophic and epidemiologically pointless. The virus was already throughout the region. Argentina and Mexico were facing economic pressure from other Latin American countries to restrict movement. Brazil was considering closing its borders to Argentine and Mexican travelers. The United States had issued travel advisories, but had not yet documented community transmission, but that was only a matter of time. In a globalized world, a virus spreading across continents reaches North America eventually. Supply chain issues began emerging. Monoclonal antibody production couldn't scale fast enough to meet demand. Antiviral stockpiles were being depleted. Personal protective equipment for healthcare workers was becoming strained. In Romania, a nursing shortage was developing. Staff were calling in sick, requesting transfers, unwilling to work in hemorrhagic fever units despite hazard pay. The narrative shifted from outbreak to pandemic. Medical journals were publishing rapid communication about the novel hantavirus. News media was covering the escalation. Social media was erupting with speculation and misinformation. And the virus kept spreading. Here's what keeps virologists and epidemiologists awake. This scenario, a novel zoonotic virus jumping to humans, adapting to human transmission, evolving to escape medical interventions, isn't theoretical. The mechanisms are real. We have seen hantaviruses with human-to-human transmission. Andes virus did exactly this. We have seen viruses escape from monoclonal antibody treatment through mutation. SARS-CoV-2 did this repeatedly. We have seen convergent evolution in viral genomes. Influenza does it seasonally. The only difference between this scenario and reality is timing and luck. And as you watch this, somewhere in the world, rodent populations are exploding due to climate change and agricultural expansion. Humans are encroaching deeper into wildlife habitats. Farming practices are creating rodent-dense environments. A virus is replicating in those rodent colonies, slowly accumulating mutations, waiting for a spillover event. Our entire disease surveillance system is built on catching spillovers after they happen. But for a virus with human-to-human transmissibility, detection often comes only after dozens or hundreds are already infected. By then, containment is exponentially harder. And as global temperatures shift, as agriculture intensifies, as human-animal contact increases, the probability of zoonotic spillover is climbing. The question isn't if a hantavirus like this will emerge. The question is when. And when it does, will we have the infrastructure, the vaccines, the antivirals, and the global coordination to stop it? Or will we be playing catch-up against a virus that's evolving faster than we can respond? The previous novel hantaviruses we've documented. Andes virus, Nuevo Mundo, killed dozens. If a virus like this emerged today, with modern mobility and population density, how many would it kill before we could respond? Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because in the age of viral evolution and ecological disruption, early warning signs matter. And right now, the conditions for the next spillover are being set every single day.